Hey guys, and welcome back to ScarletSprites. Do you like Capcom? And do you like late 80s and early 90s arcade games? Are you unwilling to make any compromises whatsoever when it comes to the accuracy of playing such titles? Because if so, the DarkSoft CPS1 multi might be for you. This is a beautiful and quite large piece of hardware that offers the ability to play the entire CPS1 library from original hardware. Because there is no emulation of any sort, no compromises to be had, this addition to your arcade lineup guarantees you'll be enjoying CPS1 titles in their original form, just like in the arcade some 30 years ago. So I'll pause for a second because I know I have some non-arcade gamers who watch the channel just to see cool stuff from time to time, and I want to give a high-level explanation of what this is. In the most basic sense, this is an EverDrive for an arcade board, specifically Capcom CPS1 hardware. By design, most arcade hardware isn't unlike the video game consoles that you're already familiar with. In many cases, though, the games or cartridges are just attached directly to the console or main board. So whereas an EverDrive looks like a cartridge for a Nintendo console, it's often going to be a little bit more elaborate than that for an arcade board. That said, however, they function more or less the same. Their job is just to deliver ROMs, which are our games, to the main board. This then allows us to play on original hardware and experience these games without any sort of emulation. So before getting into this any further, I do want to say that just like the CPS3 kit, this CPS1 setup was provided to me to look at and play with for the purposes of this video. Didn't take any money for this, and I will not be keeping the hardware afterwards. So, short translation here, I wasn't compensated for anything I'm about to say here. I'm just an arcade enthusiast who has very little time on his hands these days, who is selfishly happy to have had the chance to take a look at something that I don't own and then share it with you guys. Okay, so like other DarkSoft kits, this one comes nicely boxed with the DarkSoft logo emblazoned across the top of it. Upon opening it up, you can see it's been nicely fitted with the foam styrofoam to protect the board and other parts during shipping. This is a premium product, and the packaging does a nice job of selling that without overdoing it, considering this is hardware that is going to be installed on another board and used. You can kind of think of this as a blue-collar type of premium product, not something necessarily intended for collecting or to be displayed, but rather a slick piece of hardware that is going to be put to good use for the purist. In that sense, I think the packaging for all of DarkSoft's products is pretty spot on. Alright, inside the box we have the main board that is going to serve as your new B board for the CPS1 setup. You'll find a PAL chip that you'll need to pop onto your own supplied A board. There's a filter board that will pop onto the front of everything once this is assembled, as well as an extension that will give us a JAMA edge to plug into. There's also an LCD display and a ribbon cable included that is used to control which game is flashed to the B board. There are also two wires included that need to be soldered to your supplied A board, nothing too difficult, however. Now, I'm not going to cover the install process in its entirety here. There is already a great video on this out there that was done by Shoot the Core, and there's a PDF guide as well. Now, I don't want to oversimplify things because you definitely need to read the directions and or watch the install video if you're assembling this for the first time. But overall, this is really pretty straightforward as far as getting up and running. The hardest part of all of this is the soldering of the two wires that I just mentioned. When it's all said and done though, you should have some beastly looking board set like this. Now I'll stop for a second because I did have a small hiccup during the initial setup. The multi needs to be paired with a short A board from the CPS1 family. It also needs to have its sound section fully populated on that board. So basically a short board that's used for any of the non-CPS 1.5 games. My Final Fight board was out since that is the longer type of boards and cannot be used with the multi. The other CPS1 game I own is Street Fighter Champion Edition, which is my favorite version of Street Fighter 2, by the way. This uses the shorter type of board, it has its sound section fully populated, and it seemed like it would be a good fit for use with the multi. Unfortunately, after I was fully set up, the games just would not load and I'd get a black screen. And I rechecked my installation numerous times. I went through a few different C boards and just nothing worked for me. The A board works perfectly fine as a Champion Edition board, but for whatever unknown reason, it would not pair with the multi. Thankfully, DarkSoft and Mitsurugi were able to send over a known working A board for me, and I was able to get this up and running without any further issues. So let's not skip over that because this is the most exciting part. This is the DarkSoft CPS1 multi up and running. As you can see, I started off with Strider for the first game. It's a game that I knew older kids liked, and so as things went by, just by default, I was drawn to this as well as a kid. I've never picked up a Strider board for myself, so playing it on original hardware again is kind of a special thing for me. On that note, I should call out the setup here, which is relatively new to me. I have the CPS1 hooked up to Oxen's Supergun Mini, which is also powered by his own custom power supply. And then making its debut appearance in a ScarletSprites video, the awesome RetroTink 4K, and let me tell you, this thing has been amazing for arcade boards. This thing has synced up with everything I've tossed at it, including the CPS1 multi, and just look at the picture that it outputs. This almost looks like we're running an emulator, but it's in fact the CPS1 multi rendered in 4K, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. Loading and switching games is really simple. It's done by using this LCD selector. You can easily scroll through your list of titles that you have loaded up on the micro SD card and then flash whichever one you want to the board's memory. The flashing process is pretty quick. I'd guess that it only takes about 20 to 30 seconds to write a game to memory and then reboot the board. And if all of this seems really familiar, it's because this is pretty much exactly how things work on the equally stellar DarkSoft CPS2 multi. This time I've chosen to load up the Punisher, and yes, that is a CPS 1.5 QSound title, and it works perfectly with the multi, the same as the other CPS1 games. The QSound games have their own potentiometer on the board that is used to adjust audio levels. Aside from that though, everything else remains the same. As you can see, no surprise, the Punisher looks and plays great on this setup. And since we're talking about CPS 1.5 games, I'll also note that the entire DarkSoft setup kind of reminds me of looking at a Capcom dashboard setup. The large panel in front with the JAMA finger kind of helps sell that. I don't really know that this is a pro or con, but it's just something that I often thought about when I was looking at this impressive board set. Here's my newly acquired actual Punisher PCB for comparison. Another nice perk of the multi is that you can play ROM hacks on original hardware without having to burn chips or do a conversion. I've been wanting to try out Final Fight Anniversary Edition for some time now, and with this kit, I finally had the opportunity to do so. Now, I wasn't able to take advantage of the 3-player mode, I don't have 2 friends, but it was cool to see and play this game with some additional polish and enhancements. So overall, I've spent about 2 months with this setup, playing games on it for 30 minutes to an hour each night. Outside of my initial setup woes, I have not had any issues whatsoever with the DarkSoft CPS1 multi. Every title that I tried out played flawlessly for me. So overall, this is a really impressive kit that allows you to play the entire CPS1 library without any emulation or compromises. That fact, paired with this being a somewhat niche product for hardcore arcade enthusiasts, means that it comes with a price. The DarkSoft CPS1 kit is not cheap, there's no getting around that. This kit will run just shy of $800 US. You know, it's kind of funny, during the time I had this unit, it was connected to the RetroTink 4K, which I'd consider to be another piece of elite hardware in retro gaming. It's also not cheap. We know that that unit will cost $750 at launch. So in total, during my testing of the CPS1 kit with the RetroTink 4K, I was playing on hardware that cost in excess of $1,500. And that's not even factoring in the Supergun, the power supply, or when I switched over to the Astro City candy cap. I say this because once again, of course this isn't cheap. I know it isn't. I know it's not something that everyone, including some hardcore arcade people, is going to run out and buy. I get it. I know. But I do think we've kind of lost sight of how fortunate we are in retro gaming to have products like these as options. Because high-end hardware in hobbies, it's not a new concept. I have a friend who has spent tens of thousands of dollars on stereo equipment. He thinks of himself as an audiophile and dumps tons of money into receivers, speakers, amps, and I don't even know what else. But that's his thing. He loves music and he's willing to go that extra mile to try and squeeze an extra half percentage point of quality out of his listening experience. That doesn't mean that I don't like or enjoy music. I'm just perfectly happy with my own modest setup that costs a fraction of what his does. Getting that extra ounce out of my audio equipment just isn't that important to me, but it is to some people. I was looking at the Magnetar Blu-ray player the other day. It's considered a reference-level disc player that has earned high marks from a number of reviewers. It's a $1,600 player, and if that isn't good enough for you, there is a $3,000 model as well. I don't own these, and I can guarantee that I probably never will, but they are no doubt best-in-class hardware for the right person. And that's what I think of when I look at the RetroTink 4K and DarkSoft's multi-kits. These are the equivalent of the AV World's reference-level equipment. It's not going to be for everyone, and in fact, it's probably only for a small percentage of the diehards, but it doesn't mean that we can't marvel at the technology and be thankful for the wide plethora of options that exist, from budget-friendly to the extreme. Quite honestly, I love that retro gaming now has its own reference-level tiers of equipment. I really want to thank DarkSoft and Mitsurugi for allowing me the opportunity to borrow this kit, experience it, and ultimately share it with all of you. And I'll be honest, I've had this kit for a while. It has taken me a long time just to put this small video together, considering where my personal life is these days. But both of these guys were really patient and allowed me the time to do this. So I want to say thanks, and also I'm sorry that I had your hardware for 2 months here. Speed is just not something that's a strength of mine right now, but being granted a little grace in the timing department was greatly appreciated. Thanks to you guys for watching this and checking this out. There are links in the description if you want to pick up your own DarkSoft CPS1 multi-kit. In the US, that's going to be High Score Saves. In Europe, Save Your Games. And then Candy Cab Club for all of you Aussies out there. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Later, guys.